Hey guys, welcome back to Intelligent Faith Year 15. This is Pastor Jay. So good to be with you again. Today, this is part 2 of our mini-series, God, the Best Explanation. We're glad you've come back and you've joined us. As we talked about last time, what we're seeking to show in this mini-series is that there are certain features of reality, certain features of our universe that we know and perceive to be true, that God would happen to be the best explanation for these features. This is what we're going to be demonstrating from the Christian worldview and perspective. And of course, the 8 features that we mentioned last time in the introduction would be the following. Feature number 1 that needs an explanation and we believe points to God is the fact that the universe exists at all. That is a feature that obviously is true and it does need an explanation. Feature number 2 is that the fact the universe had a beginning. Not only does philosophy demonstrate this to us, but science in recent years, in the 20th century, has also shown us that the universe did indeed have a beginning. Feature number 3, the fine-tuning of the universe, referring of course to the laws of physics and the constants mathematically of nature. That's a feature that needs an explanation. Also, mathematical and logical applicability. These features also, we believe, point powerfully to the existence of God Himself as the best explanation. Also, moral objectivity, conscious intentionality, and then theistic possibility. The fact that God's existence does at least appear to be logically possible, that holds some interesting implications. So over the course of this series, we're going to be going through these features. We do hope that you'll come back and you'll join us for all of these videos. Do encourage you to check out our mother website if you're not there already, intelligentfaith315.com, and go to iTunes. We have a new radio podcast called Intelligent Faith. You can search for that and download it. And also Reason to Believe. That's reason in the singular, Reason to Believe. And download that, and hopefully that'll be a benefit to you. If you're a Christian, we're here to equip you and give you tools and resources to defend and articulate the Christian worldview intelligently with the evidence and proof that exists for the Christian worldview. And if you're an atheist or a naturalist or materialist, we're glad that you're here, and we just want to share some of this evidence with you, and hopefully it'll help you in your own intellectual journey in seeking the truth out about reality. So today, we're going to be getting into the first feature of the mini-series. Feature number 1, the existence of the universe. Now this, in a sense, is very basic, very fundamental, but even though that's the case, this kind of a feature about reality must be explained. Of course, if any of us doubt our own existence, you can, of course, think of René Descartes, the Christian philosopher from the 1500s, and he said, well, I can doubt almost everything, but the one thing I cannot doubt is my own existence, because every time I doubt, it proves the existence of the doubter. So our existence seems to be undeniable and self-evident, but the existence of the universe as a whole, this does seem to cry out for an explanation. And if you're familiar with philosophy, with deductive thinking, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz is the German philosopher that is popular for posing the question regarding the universe's existence, and he said it like this: why is there anything rather than nothing? You know, as you go outside at nighttime and you look up at the starry sky, that's a great question to ponder. And of course, this is how philosophy was birthed, by the pondering and thinking of the deep, fundamental questions of life. Why is there anything as opposed to nothing? And some have said that is the fundamental and deepest question of all of philosophical thinking. Why is there anything as opposed to nothing? Well, let's dive into this question a little bit and see what we can discover, what might be perhaps the best explanation for the feature of the universe. So, premise number 1, every contingent thing has an explanation for its existence. And if you're unfamiliar, as the listener, as the viewer, with what a contingent thing is, there basically are 2 broad categories of existing things. You have something that is contingent and something that is necessary. A contingent object is something that could have not existed. A contingent thing, a contingent being, or a contingent object is something that owes its existence to another. The cause of this contingent object lies outside of the object itself. For example, a chair is a contingent thing because it owes its existence to the chair maker. A human being is a contingent object for many, many reasons, but one of which is the fact that a human being owes his existence to his mother and father. And so a contingent thing is a being, is an object, that the reason for its existence lies outside of itself in something else. So every contingent thing has an explanation of its existence. Of course, the other category, besides contingent, is something that is necessary. Now, the way to understand this differentiation is a contingent thing is something that possibly could not exist. It could pass away. It could not be. It's dependent. That's a contingent thing. But a necessary thing, a necessary being or a necessary object, is something that must exist. It is something that it is impossible for it not to exist. Its non-existence isn't even possible. So for example, many philosophers of mathematics, they would say that numbers are necessary abstract objects. And so that's the distinction between a contingent thing and a necessary thing. A contingent thing is something that could possibly not be. And for that very reason, a contingent thing has an explanation for its existence. There is something that explains why this contingent thing exists. Now, by the nature of the case, it has to be that way. A contingent object, a contingent being, as we said, is exactly something that the explanation for it lies in something else. So, it is true that every contingent thing has an explanation for its existence. That truth is definitely more plausible than its opposite. So, we can continue then to the next one. Number 2, and this might be where you as the viewer have the greatest problem, especially if you're an atheist or a materialist or a naturalist. Premise number 2, if the universe has an explanation of its existence, it is a transcendent, personal being. So, here's why we would say this. Now, number 1, the universe would have an explanation of its existence. It would have to be transcendent because the universe cannot explain itself. If there is an explanation for the universe in reality, by the very nature of the case, it would have to be outside of the universe. And if it is outside of the universe, by definition, it would have to then be transcendent. If there is something outside of the universe that explains it, well, what kind of a thing could that be? Well, if this thing is outside of the universe, it would have to be immaterial. And the only type of immaterial beings that we know of would basically be 2 things: numbers or a mind. Now, numbers, such as the number 7, the number 6, the number 22, these are immaterial abstract objects or realities, but these abstract immaterial objects don't cause anything to happen. They don't have causal relations. There's no cause and effect going on between a number and anything else. So though they would perhaps be considered transcendent by some and definitely immaterial, they would be eliminated as a possible answer to this question, a possible candidate. But as I said, there's something else. There is something that could be transcendent and is immaterial and that isn't physical in nature, and this would be a mind, a consciousness. And so a transcendent personal being, a transcendent personal mind, would be an explanation for the universe. If the universe has an explanation, it would have to be transcendent because it's outside, and the only possible candidate that we would know of for that is an immaterial, timeless, personal mind. So that does seem to be a good explanation. Now, of course, someone could say the universe doesn't have an explanation. We could say that contingent things don't have an explanation for their existence. But then that would lead us to the thinking that things don't have explanations, that things are uncaused, unexplained. And this, of course, goes against so many areas of human thinking. We don't live this way, we don't operate that way, and science doesn't function that way. If we were to surrender to the idea that things can be unexplained or uncaused, then this would eliminate virtually all of scientific thinking. And if you're watching this video and you're an atheist or a materialist, you obviously put a high premium on scientific knowledge. And scientific knowledge essentially is the search for an explanation. And so it would seem to be the case, number 1, that every contingent thing does have an explanation for its existence. Essentially, the scientific enterprise is engaged in searching for explanations of contingent things. Virtually everything that we know of, falls into this category of the contingent. Whether it's atoms or gases, humans, chairs, aardvarks, whatever the case would be, most everything that we know of or conceptualize of is something that is contingent and is dependent and owes its explanation to something else. Premise number 2 also seems to be more plausible than not. If the universe has an explanation of its existence, it would then have to be a transcendent, personal being. The universe couldn't have its explanation within itself. It would have to lie outside of itself. Unless the universe was self-caused, that couldn't be the case. Now, you can choose that option as the viewer. You can say, you can choose that the universe is self-caused, it is eternal, it's a necessary object, a necessary being, that it's impossible for the universe not to exist, its non-existence isn't even possible, and you can say, therefore, the universe has no explanation for its existence, it simply is, and it is a brute fact. But to think that the universe is self-caused, listen to me now, that is a logical, incoherent idea. Because for the universe to be self-caused would mean this. The universe would have to exist before it existed in order to bring itself into existence. So actually the notion that anything could be self-caused, including God, including anything, is a logically incoherent idea. So whatever perspective or philosophy you take about the universe, it does seem logical, it does seem necessary, it does seem plausible that the universe has to have an explanation outside of itself. If that is the case, that means that the explanation has to be transcendent. That's what transcendent means, outside of the universe. And the only thing that is immaterial, non-physical, that could be a cause or an explanation for the universe would have to be a personal being, an immaterial mind that is transcendent. That is, premise number 2 seems to be much more plausible than its negation, than its opposite. So then premise number 3, the universe is a contingent thing. Now this is very important to establish. Again, the only other option you have, if you want to deny that premise, is to say the universe is not a contingent thing, but rather a necessary thing, a necessary being, a necessary object. The non-existence of the universe is impossible. That could never happen. And everybody would basically agree, either philosophers or scientists, that the non-existence of the universe is possible, and perhaps one day in the far, far distant future, maybe even scientifically likely. But so, if we can imagine a different universe, if we can imagine plausibly that the universe could have been very different, like the negative universe, let's say, or the phantom zone universe, like in certain comic books or movies, if we can conceptualize of a universe that could have been instead of this one, that means this universe could possibly not have been. And that means that this universe is indeed a contingent thing. It can pass away. It could have passed away. It doesn't have to exist at all. It does seem to be very obvious, basically to everybody, that the universe definitely is a contingent thing, in philosophy and in science as well. So we can then proceed to the next premise. Therefore, from 1 and 3, if we see that every contingent thing has an explanation for its existence, and if premise 3, the universe is a contingent thing, it would follow logically a preliminary conclusion here. Therefore, the universe has an explanation for its existence. If the universe is a contingent thing, and every contingent thing has an explanation for its existence, preliminary conclusion, the universe has an explanation of its existence. And then this leads us undeniably and unmistakably to the 5th premise, that therefore the explanation of the universe is a transcendent personal being. You get this, of course, from number 2, that if the universe does have an explanation, it would have to be a transcendent personal being. And from 4, the universe has an explanation of its existence, and therefore it leads us to this ultimate conclusion that the best explanation for the universe existing at all seems to be a transcendent personal being. an unembodied mind, an immaterial mind that is non-physical, non-temporal, it exists outside of time, but can cause things to happen because it is personal and can give existence. Of course, this personal mind itself, since it is the cause and source of all contingent reality of the physical, temporal, spatio-universe, since it is the cause and the explanation of all contingent reality, this mind itself would have to be a necessary, personal, transcendent mind. And already what we have here are many of the attributes of God. That God himself is, by definition, in multiple religions and multiple philosophies, at the most fundamental level, a metaphysically necessary being, a transcendent mind that exists outside of time and space. And it does seem that God is the best explanation for the existence of the universe. We'll leave it there. We'll continue next time explaining feature number 2, the beginning of the universe. We hope you'll join us then. Until next time, have an intelligent faith.